I am so excited to welcome our guest today, Dr. John DeGarmo. He is an expert in the field of foster care and adoption. He's an advocate, he's a speaker, he's a writer, and I'm just thrilled to have you here. Thanks for taking the time, John.
Oh, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got to where you are? Like, why foster care? Was there something in your past that connected you to that? Or tell me about your story.
Well, there was nothing in my past that connected me to. In fact, I didn't want to do it. I had no interest or desire to be a foster parent. I believed so many of the myths, so many of the misconceptions that were associated with it, that the kids are bad kids, or foster parents are weird people.
Mhm.
That last one's true because you got to be a little bit weird to do what you do. It's a very different kind of lifestyle.
Mhm.
But what
Mhm.
led my wife and I became foster parents was my wife's from Australia. We lived there for a number of years. And our first child died of a condition called anencephaly, or some pronounce it anencephaly. It's a condition where the brain or skull doesn't truly form. And my wife was in labor for 92 hours.
Mm, I'm
And
sorry.
oh yeah, yeah. And that was oh gosh, almost 30 years ago. And
Mhm.
then years later we moved back to the United States. We had three healthy children. At that time, I was teaching in a very, very rural school system in middle Georgia. And two things happened that really significantly led us to foster parenting. The first one was I had a lot of kids in this rural county who had issues of behavior, academics, attendance. And I kept asking, why? What's going on in this small county? And I met a lot of the birth parents and I recognized, aha, it starts in the home.
Mhm.
And that time, I also had a senior in my classroom who was pregnant with triplets, recognized that neither he nor the father of the kids was in any shape whatsoever to take care of
Mhm.
those kids. And the second thing was in this rural county, Putnam County, Georgia, there was at that time in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was the largest child sex trafficking ring in America happening there,
Wow.
right under their noses. And most people did not recognize it. And I had a lot of those kids in my classroom who were victims. The gentleman who was leading it was named Dr. Malachi York. He had this Nawabian nation. He was eventually arrested for bringing over 1,000 children over state lines to have sex with them, and then many of those kids were in my classroom as victims. So I went to my wife and said, "Hey, we lost our first child. I got these human trafficking victims in my classroom. I've got this student who's pregnant with triplets. What if I brought those triplets home?" And my wife said, and I should have listened to her. She said, "As long as you change the diapers." We went we went 20 years straight, no joke, 20 years straight with at least one child in diapers. We even had
Oh
at
my God.
one year, we actually had 7 in diapers in our house at the same time,
Oh God.
which I think that should be criminal in all 50 states. That was insane. So, that really led us to saying, how can we help? We lost our first child. How can we help other kids? That led to fostering over 60 plus kids. We've adopted 3 from the system. We've been blessed to do that, and, I'm very driven every day to make the system a better one.
Wow. Wow. So your wife was on board right away. That's
Yes.
imperative. I mean, you got to have that. Were your children, your biological children already grown, or what age were they?
When we first started, our oldest was 5,
Oh.
so our kids have lived that's all they've known. That's all
Mhm.
that's their norm,
Right.
and I think that my children are much better people because of it. None of them I have 6 children, 3 biological, 3 adopted, um, and I think that while maybe none of my 6 might be foster parents in the future, I firmly believe every one of them will lead a life of serving others in some way because they've been able to see up close, personal, and live with children who have suffered horrific abuse, trauma, neglect in their own home as their
Mhm.
foster siblings.
That's right. A lot of people that I talk to are afraid of that. Can you speak to that? Like they're afraid of the impact that it will have on their biological children.
Well, I couldn't do it without my kids, to be sure. My wife and I could not have done it without the kids. When a child's placed in our home, our kids would quickly gather around them, lead them by the hand around the house, give them a tour, and the next thing they know, they're playing with them, a little bit of play therapy, if you will.
Mhm.
Um, and again, I point back to I think that my kids are they're gonna lead a life of serving others. They're quick to stand up for bullying. They have much more compassionate heart towards those who suffer. But when you get that phone call for a placement for foster care, you've got to ask yourself the questions: Is this a good fit for my family today? Is
Mhm.
is my family a good fit for this child today? Is this child a good fit for my family today? And sometimes that answer might be no. Sometimes it might not be a necessarily good fit. But overall, I think my children by far have have really been blessed to have so many kids come to the home. Have there been times when they said it's hard? Oh yeah, to be sure.
Mhm.
Sometimes they say, "Dad, this kid's driving me crazy," and I say, "Yeah,
Mhm.
he's driving me crazy too." Um, but again, they are so much more compassionate than I think their peers.
I bet. Yeah, of course they are. Um, did they experience loss? I mean, I'm sure they did when some of the children were reunified or something like that. And how did you handle that? How did you guys work through that?
Oh, to be sure. Foster parents struggle a lot with feelings of grief and loss. The child leaves the home. In our house, there's no label, there's no biological, there's no foster, there's no adoptive. They're all our children. And my own children feel the same way. They feel that, this is their sibling. And sometimes, yeah, there is, to be sure, heavy feelings of loss and grief when some of the kids leave. Yes,
Hmm.
absolutely.
Hmm. And are you able to keep in touch with them, or I guess it would be on a case by case basis?
It is a case by case basis. We just this past Christmas, my wife, unbeknownst to my entire family, I had one of our former foster kiddos show up at our house. He had been abandoned by his mother at age 17 for her boyfriend of 1 month, who said, "Hey, make a choice, m- me or your son." And so she
Mm.
kicked him out. He ended up homeless, and he was with us for quite some time. And we hadn't seen him in 6 years. And I had contacted him through social media, and he showed up with his family, with his wife and his two kids, and my entire family was completely surprised. We try to
Wow.
stay in touch with as many as possible, but
Hmm.
sometimes it doesn't happen. Sometimes they
Right.
go back to an environment, and their birth parents say, "You know what? That's a chapter in our life that we don't want to remember."
Right. Yeah. Sure. I get that. What made you out of you said you had 60 about 60 kids have come through. What made you adopt the 3 that you adopted? Like, I'm just trying to understand, were all the other ones reunified, or was it just like, yeah, this isn't a good fit, or how does that work?
Well, we've actually had 4 failed adoptions where we tried to
Okay.
adopt children, and for some whatever reason it might be, the adoption fell through with sabotage, etcetera. The
Mhm.
ones that were up for adoption, that we've adopted, they just happened to come up for adoption, termination of parental rights, which
Mhm.
means which means, for those who might not know, is the birth parents have a certain amount of time to work their caseload, and if they're unable to do so, many times there's an extension, but if they're unable to do so, it goes up for adoption. And if there's no biological family member or close relative or close family member who wants to adopt, then the foster parents often get the right to do so. And we didn't go into it setting out to adopt by all
Okay.
means. Um, we didn't do that. But I point again to the fact that when they come to my house, they become members of my family, and I believe every child should have a forever family.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And unfortunately, as we know, that's not the case at all.
Right.
Um Would you say that the need now for foster families is greater or the same as when you started, or is it different? Like, what are some of the differences that you see now versus when you first started?
Well, when we first started back in, gosh, 2001, 2002, we didn't have, I think, the issue that we're facing today.
Mhm.
And I was just talking to a journalist a few moments ago, and I tell every journalist the real pandemic right now, it's not a
Mhm.
virus, it's mental health. We are in a mental health pandemic for our children, on a variety of levels. Mainly, a lot of it's due to the unnecessary lockdowns that we had in 2020 and 2021. We have a 70% increase in teenage suicide attempts.
Mm.
When we had the pandemic, I'm sorry, when we had the lockdowns, here I was, a lone voice in the wilderness, if you will, saying in April of 2020, we can't close these schools down because when you have 5 million children who experience domestic violence in their house every single
Mhm.
day,
Mhm.
they go to school for three things: for 2 meals a day, they might not be getting a home, a
Right.
mandated reporter, but more importantly, for 8 hours a day, they're not being abused, raped, whatever it might be. And what
Mhm.
we did was we locked them at home with their abuser with no mandated reporter whatsoever. And we thought, well, society thought this is the best interest of the children. We're protecting them. We didn't. It was horrific.
Wow.
And we're seeing the results. So we're seeing a huge issue of mental health issues a number of ways. At the same time, we don't have enough foster parents. We don't have
Mhm.
enough foster parents. And of course, we're seeing an increase in human trafficking as well. The last 4 years, have we've seen a huge increase in human trafficking. Again, we don't have the foster parents. There's not enough foster parents. We lost a
Mhm.
lot of good foster parents during the lockdowns because what I
Mhm.
was hearing from across the country was when the children in foster care were not going to school anymore, they're not getting the support services they needed because they're 18 months behind academically. They were not getting professional therapy and counseling services. They weren't getting in-person visitations, and their
Mhm.
anxiety levels went through the roof.
Sure.
And foster parents are telling me, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a counselor, I'm not a teacher. I can't teach them this stuff they're doing online.
Right.
We can't do 5-day visitations online virtually. And foster parents' anxiety levels were through the roof, and there was no support for them because
Mhm.
no one could come and visit them and help them because, again, of the lockdowns. So we
Right.
lost a lot of good foster parents. So more kids in crisis, more kids suffering from mental health issues, more children being human trafficking. Um, you have an opiate epidemic that has not gone away. In fact, it may have escalated. Yet there's not enough people who will say, you know what, I'm willing to make this unique lifestyle a life of sacrifice. Foster parenting is, I think, a life of sacrificing because you sacrifice a lot of your things to care for these children in crisis in your home.
Mhm.
And I'll say it's the hardest thing I've done. It's the most rewarding thing I've done, but it's been the most challenging thing I've done at the same time.
Yeah. Of course it has. I can't believe your energy level that you're able to keep it up for as long as you have done. Like I adopted 2 from the foster care system in LA, and so that was about 2.5 years for one, 2 for the other, and I was just so exhausted after that experience that I cannot imagine. And here you are doing trainings and speaking and doing all the stuff. I'm assuming that you stopped teaching at a certain point and this became your life and your career.
Very driven,
Yeah.
very driven, very driven. And, we've had as many as 11 kids in the house at the same time. Um, and it is exhausting, but at the same time, every child's made me a better person in some way.
Yeah. You said that, the foster parents weren't receiving the support. And I know that this is a part of what you do. Can you talk about how you support foster families? And I know why it's important, but for other listeners who might not know.
Well, I do it through a number of ways through the Foster Care Institute. To begin with, I travel the nation providing in-person training, in-person support for those foster, adoptive, and kinship parents. Because when you get a child, I think back to, maybe you can relate. I think back to my very first placement. I tell you what, I thought I was ready. I thought I was ready for this. I went through training. I had
Right.
3 kids. I've been teaching. My wife had a degree in psychology, and within 20 minutes, the first placement came at 10:30 at night, and by 10:50 at night, I thought, "Oh my gosh, I am not prepared for this at
Mhm.
all."
Oh, yeah.
And then when the children left my home, I wasn't prepared for the amount of grief and heartbreak I was experiencing either. I thought they told me this is going to happen, but I'm not ready for this.
Right.
So I provide
Mhm.
a lot of in-person training and support for those foster parents because you got to, every time a child comes in your home, it's going to be a different experience.
Mhm.
You may have had kids who have experienced similar abusive traits, but every child's unique, every child's different, so they're going to experience it differently.
Right.
Well, that means every time a child comes in your home, it's going to be a learning curve. So I provide those type of in-person training and support
Mhm.
services. We have at the Foster Care Institute, we have over 80 hours of online training webinars where foster parents can get their licensing hours, but I think more importantly, jump on and find out, hey, this child has a reactive attachment disorder. What is that? This child
Right.
has sleep anxieties. How do I handle this? My own marriage is suffering. My own biological children are struggling. Well, how do I help?
Right.
I work with a lot of legislators to improve the system, reform the system. Lots of webinars, um, um, books, of course. My next book's coming out
Sure.
next month. I've got a book coming out soon as well. So
Oh,
a
great.
number of ways, a number of ways.
Tell me about your books and the one that's coming out. next?
Well, when I finished my doctorate, which was centered around foster care, I realized I love to write. So I wanted to write a book. My first one was I wanted to write a book about the life of a foster parent from a dad's perspective without sugarcoating it. The
Mhm.
joys, the sorrows, the heartbreak, the successes. That one's called Fostering a Loved One Foster Parent's Journey, and that led to a lot of different books. My newest, Faith in Foster Care, The Church in Foster Care, The Foster Parenting Manual,
Mhm.
Keeping Foster Children Safe Online, lots of them. My newest one, I thought I was done. After my 12th book, I thought, okay, I'm done. What else do I have to say? Um, and then I've been working the last several years with a dear friend of mine by the name of Jen Lilly, who used to live in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
She's an actress.
Yeah, Jem was just on the show, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
All
she's
right.
so great. Love her.
Yes,
Yep.
yes. Well, we've written a book together. It should come out 2025.
Amazing. I
Yeah.
didn't even know that. We didn't even get to that. She's like so
Yes.
I could talk to her forever and we did not even touch on that. So I'm
Well,
glad you're saying it.
maybe the two of us need to come on the show in the future together.
I would
But
love that. Yeah, it'd
it's
be
a
great.
it, it's a different kind of book because it has two different perspectives. It has a mother's perspective, a father's perspective,
Mhm.
a person who's a celebrity and a person who's an expert in the field, a person who's been
Right.
doing it for a long time, a person who's not doing it such a long time. And I'm really excited about this book. It's different. It's tentatively called, and of course, the publisher could change the name of it, but it's
Mhm.
tentatively called "Everything You Want to Know About Foster Parenting, but We're Afraid to Ask,"
Oh,
or
that's
something
great. I
along the
love
line.
that.
Yeah,
I think that's so important. Are you also is it just the 2 of your perspectives, or are you also including other people's stories?
there are some other voices in the book,
Mhm.
but it's mainly our two perspectives. So now, some of my books, the Foster Care Survival Guide, Faith in Foster Care, they have other voices in that book as well. But this is
Okay.
just generally Jen and I. We're talking about doing a podcast together as well. So there's a few other things
Mhm.
that may come up the line.
I love that. That's so great. You talked about you work sometimes with the government and trying to affect change, and it's something that I'm really, really excited to hear more about. What types of things need to happen? What are the reforms that still need to happen? What are you working on?
Well, you know, when it comes to Washington, D.C., a lot of legislators don't have the insight that they need about foster care, foster parenting. It's not an
Hmm.
issue that drives votes. It's not a sexy issue, so to speak. I kind of parallel it to human trafficking. Human trafficking is America's ugly secret. It makes us feel uncomfortable, so we don't address it. Our
Hmm.
legislators don't address it, and they don't address foster care either because, again, it's something people aren't familiar with. It may make people feel uncomfortable, so it's not addressed. So there's lots of room for improvement. In addition, there's 50 different states, which means there's 50 different ways of doing foster care, and no state does it perfect. Some states do it better than others. Um, so you're working at a state level and at a federal level. I've been doing that.
Hmm.
Jen and I went to DC in the midst the the lockdowns in 2020 to talk to legislators about improving reunification.
Hmm.
50% of kids in foster care are reunified, but of that 50%, 20 to 30% come back into care later on,
Mm. Hmm.
further traumatized, further sometimes further abused, or sometimes they even die when they go back home because for a variety of reasons. So we
Hmm.
worked on that as well.
Hmm.
More support services are needed for foster parents and the birth parents. I'd like to see foster parents get professional therapy and counseling services as well.
Hmm.
I think every child
Absolutely.
should have that as well. There's a number of things. It's just it's I'm working with a university as a consultant, and they called me up and said, "Hey, we would like you to be a consultant for us as we do this foster care program." And as we've been talking, they have realized, oh my gosh, we did not realize this issue was so huge. Where
Yeah.
do you start on fixing foster care in America? You can
Right.
work on this, you can work on this, you can work on this. There's so much.
Yeah.
And again, many of our legislators just don't know.
Yeah. Absolutely. And even for our listeners, let's touch on the human trafficking, the trafficking, like how it ties in with foster care for people who aren't aware of that connection.
Well, yeah, Sadly, human trafficking is in every single nation, every single community in our nation. It's the number one global business. Many people just will not acknowledge it or recognize it because, again, it makes them feel
It
uncomfortable. It's such a
is
horrific crime.
is it I've never heard that it's the number 1 global business. That is appalling.
Because
That I
I could sell this, I could sell this magazine one time, and
Mhm,
that's it. But I could sell a child 10 to 12 times a day, 7 days a week, 10 years,
mhm,
over and over and over and over and over again. So
mhm,
it is eclipse drugs. It's eclipse
mhm,
drugs.
mhm,
Many children. Well, let's look at the lockdowns. You know, when we locked our kids down at homes and told them to go do their schoolwork on the computers, they weren't doing their schoolwork. Not at all. We know that
no,
now. Pandemic learning loss. But many kids in the foster care system, even before the lockdowns, they were going online for one reason: looking for love, looking for
mhm,
acceptance, looking for normalcy, looking for someone to love them. And that's where the human predators are. They're lurking there, looking for the most vulnerable children, and many of those kids are in foster care, and
mhm,
lure them in with false hopes, false promises, false dreams, if you will. And many of these kids run away to that dream of a better lifestyle. Every child wants a family. Every child wants to be told, "I love you." And for kids in foster care, particularly, they're looking for that love, and those predators are there waiting for them to come online
yeah,
with false personas, etc.
yeah,
So it makes sense. There's a clear link from foster care to human trafficking because they run away from their foster care homes. I've had kids in
right,
my own home over the years who have been victims of human trafficking before they came to live with us.
mhm, wow. Thank you for explaining that, and also the connection to the pandemic and how it went up. I'm assuming that's why, because you said it's more prevalent than ever now because of the pandemic and kids being on the computer so much. Is that the
That's part of
connection?
it. Part of it,
Okay.
and then of course our border is very, very open,
Mhm.
um, and we've seen thousands upon thousands upon thousands of children coming into our nation across a very, very open border.
Mhm.
And our current administration has just not been diligent enough to address the issue.
Wow. Well, thank you for mentioning that because I mean it's something that I think everyone can agree. I It boils my blood. It just I want to do something and I don't know what to do. I have this podcast. I'm trying to spread awareness. I think a lot of people feel, what do we do about this? Like, what can I do as like just a citizen? What do you have any advice for people like myself or other people that are just like, God, I want to do something, but I don't even know what to do?
Well, you're doing it. You're bringing awareness to an issue, and I think awareness equals advocacy. The more people you become aware, the more advocates you'll have fighting for this. A lot of people, as I mentioned earlier, just don't want to admit that our open border policy has led to this catastrophic, horrific crime that's happening to our children. Our legislators are more concerned about budget instead of
Mhm.
the lives of children,
Mhm.
which just angers me. Um, you can help human trafficking by recognizing the signs.
Mhm.
By There's a number of ways. I have one of my articles is 5 ways to help victims help prevent human trafficking, and two of those are awareness, becoming
Mhm.
an advocate,
Yeah.
recognizing the signs. Yeah,
Right. Yeah, I remember when we were in our foster care training, we had to take classes about that, and that was when my eyes were first opened up to, because it didn't. I don't think I even realized that it happened in this country until I started taking those classes, and I was like, oh my God, and the signs of it. What are some of the signs? I think I remember from my training, it's like, a young girl with like a man with no luggage. Isn't that one of them? Like they don't have
it could be.
any.
Yes, yes. Children who will not look you in the eye. Someone traveling
Mhm.
with apparently a stranger. Um, there are a number of tattoos they can use that are used for branding.
Mhm.
Children who do not have a children do not have a home. They go from place to place.
Mhm.
Those are a few of the signs.
Yeah. You have such a great website, and I'm sure there's a lot of stuff on there. I'm going to link to it, but I just want to say it out too so I don't forget. Dr. John DeGarmo, fostercare.com.
That's right.
And
Or just simply look for the Foster Care Institute.
or
Foster
the
Care.
Foster Care Institute, which is, of course, your something that you started. Tell me about that and how you started it, and what that institute is doing.
Well, that's where we have all of, if you go to the foster care institute, I kind of call it a one-stop shop, if you will, for all things foster care. There's my 4 years as a podcast host, all of our articles, webinars,
Hmm.
videos. It's all there for foster care adoption, human kinship care. Again, that's where we work with legislators to reform the system. That's where we go across the country, working with child welfare
Hmm.
programs, foster care programs, foster parents, staff, caseworkers. Today's caseworkers are overworked, overwhelmed, under-resourced, under-supported, understaffed, and underpaid, and they quit and at a high rate as well as foster parents,
Yeah.
because it's such a burnout job. So we also try to help support caseworkers as well because they suffer from something that foster parents often suffer from, and that is secondary traumatic stress, otherwise known as compassion fatigue. And I love that
Mm,
term, compassion fatigue. Think about that. Fatigue, exhaustion from compassion, from caring. And many foster parents and caseworkers experience compassion fatigue and they say, this is so hard. I can't do this anymore.
right. Yeah. I can only imagine what that must be like. I always tried to remind myself when I was going through the process, and you have to meet with them a lot. And sometimes like they would maybe be grumpy or they wouldn't be, and I always remind myself like you have no idea what they're dealing with all day. I tried to be like the light in their day, like just pour light into this person because he or she needs it, you know? They're human and they're dealing with just the crap all the
Yes.
time, like just the
Yes.
really hard stuff all the time. So, yeah, I hear that. That's great. Do you think that you are this is kind of like a out there question in a way, but I am always really interested in if you feel that you were sort of called to this work in some way, or do you think was there some kind of a uh spiritual or sort of like some kind of a meant to be aspect to you devoting your life to this from where you went as you were just a teacher, and I'm curious to hear your take on that.
Well, as I mentioned, it's the hardest thing I've done. And I also mentioned I never wanted to do it. I never intended, planned on it. I looked at foster parents very strange. You guys must be weird. And again, we are. We're weird to do what we do. To bring a child to your home in crisis, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that's tough.
Yeah.
A child does not want to be there. A child that most likely has issues of trust, has issues of attachment, has maybe anger management challenges, whatever it might be. So yes, I definitely feel I've been called, and the vast majority of foster parents across the country say they do it because of their faith. That's why I
Mhm.
wrote the book Faith in Foster Care. I was
Mhm.
interviewing foster parents across the country. Why do you do this? And the majority of them said, I do it because I feel called to do so. And
Mhm.
that's why I wrote the book The Church in Foster Care, because I don't think that this is too big for the government. I think this is the church's next great mission field. We don't have to go to. I've been to Mexico. My children have been to Honduras and Nicaragua. That's wonderful, life changing. But there's a mission field in every community across this
Mm.
nation, and I think the church is being called to do that. So for me, yes, it is definitely a calling. There have been days where I thought, God, I can't do this anymore. I need your help. I'm
Yeah.
struggling right now. I need your help. Yeah, sure. Or God, why did you allow this to happen to a child? How can this happen to me,
Mhm.
child? My book Faith and my book Fostering Love, my book Love and Mayhem relate a lot of the stories about the kids come to my home, and some of those stories are just heartbreaking, horrific
Yeah.
stories.
I know. I know. And that it takes me back to thinking about how um, brave you've been, not only for yourself but for your children, to because you know that okay, so you had biological children in the house and these other children are coming in that have a lot of trauma, and the fear of like, oh, they're gonna something's gonna happen or they're gonna do something or act out or this is going to affect my kid. And did you ever experience any of that? Like, were your kids affected? I mean, they had to have been in some ways.
Oh, sure, sure.
Yeah,
They've all affected, but I think they're all much stronger for it. I
of
think they're all
course.
so much
Yeah.
stronger. We had this when my wife and I first started fostering for a number of years. We had this unwritten rule, if you will, that we would not take a child into our home older than our oldest child because we
Right.
didn't know
Like
it's
preserving the birth order that
right, right,
it's been
and then
mentioned to me before. Yeah.
right, and then we got a phone call years ago. This may have been our fourth or fifth year doing it. About a 13-year-old. The time my oldest was 10, I think. So it's been maybe 5 years into it. And I said, no, no, he's 13. And the caseworker said, well, listen to a story, please. Listen to a story.
Hmm.
And it was his birthday, and he was driving along a tremendously busy interstate in Atlanta, Georgia, with his mother. And his mother pulled over the side of the road and said, son, it's your birthday. The presents are in the trunk of the car. Get out of the car and open the trunk up and bring them in the car, and we'll celebrate right here. And he's very excited. It's his birthday. His mom remembered. He's got all these
Mm.
gifts ready for him. And he got out of the car, closed the door, and mom took off. Abandoned him there on the side of the highway on his birthday. And when my wife and I heard that, we said we have to help with
Yeah.
that. So when he came to us, not only was he incredibly traumatized, confused, scared, wondering, what did I do wrong? That isn't my fault. It's mom not love
Yeah.
me anymore. Will I ever see my mom again? He's also old enough to recognize that I'm in foster care, a label no one child wants.
Hmm.
And I remember it was 2 o'clock in the morning, and I could hear him in the bedroom trying to stop from crying. He was sobbing heavy. So I said to my wife, I'm out of here. I jumped in the car, drove 45 minutes to a local, to the nearest Walmart. We live right in the woods. And we made his next morning, his birthday, very, very special. And
Oh,
he was only with us for a short time, but he had a tremendous impact on my own children. Um, and that was a very positive experience for my own kids.
wow. Yeah. So you just don't know. Like you
No,
don't really know how it's going to affect
right?
a- anyone in the constellation.
Yeah, yeah.
You know.
We had no plans on adopting the three that we adopted,
Right.
um, but they are very much part of my family. And I said earlier,
Sure.
every child that comes through my home is part of my family in some way.
Right.
And we would have done it over and over again if possible.
How did you have the space for you said at one point you had 11 children in the house? You must have a big house.
Well, every spare I don't have a
Mhm.
we don't have a storage room anymore. We don't have a I mean, every room we've turned into a bedroom, basically.
Wow.
Um, yeah,
That's
yes,
amazing. Yeah.
yes. You should see our house at Christmas time. Oh my goodness.
Oh, I bet it's incredible. It
Yeah,
must be really fun though, like to have all these kids. I mean, I know it's not always fun, but like to have all of those kids and for all of those kids to kind of feel like they're a part of a big family. I mean, that,
it's magical.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a blessing. I go back to Christmas. Christmas is such a wonderful, joyous time at our house because all these kids come back. Uh,
Mm.
and it's just there's so much joy, laughter, and love in the household.
Oh, that's incredible. I love that so much. If you were to, a lot of the listeners are people that are interested in being a foster family, but they're like just dipping their toe in the water. What kind of advice would you give to them?
The first thing I would do is suggest you talk about your partner, your spouse, because if you're going to be a foster parent and you are married or in your relationship, both have to be fully committed. It is not something that one person can do and the other person halfway does it. You both have to be fully committed. So after you have the
Mhm.
discussion, sit down and have a discussion with your kids as well. And then you contact your local child welfare agency and said, we're ready to go. You don't have to be rich. You don't have to be married. You don't have to have a house. I'm sorry, a big house. You don't have to have a job. You
Mhm.
just have to, that'll all be sorted out. The most important thing is discuss it with your spouse, partner, your family, and make sure you've got some type of support system involved.
Mhm.
And then buckle up for a wild roller coaster of emotion and adventure.
Right. Wow. All right. That's great specific advice. Yeah, it's funny. Jen and I were actually talking about how, like, um, oftentimes one of the people in the couple is really into it and the other person is like maybe not so sure. And I experienced that in my marriage. I was like, this is what we're doing, like we need to do this. And my husband was like, "Ugh," like he was open to it, but he was very fearful about it. And so I also just want to say that just because they're not like 100% on board yet, like, I mean, they can kind of like get there sometimes. And obviously, you shouldn't like push somebody into it. But, through the classes, when he realized what a need there was and when he really dove into the subject and became educated about it, then he was like, yeah, like let's do this.
Right, right.
So,
My wife my when I approached my wife about it, she had been thinking about it as well at the same time. So
mhm,
we were both heading down that path, if you will. Uh,
yeah.
you mentioned Jen. I mentioned support services. You gotta have support services. There have been many times over the years, Jen would call me up and say, "Hey, I need what do you tell me what to do? Tell me what to
Mhm.
do. I got this child in my house who has got this problem, this problem, this problem."
Yeah.
So you've gotta have that support system in place.
Yeah, that's something I found incredibly helpful actually was all of the extra eyes that were on my children. My daughter is autistic and ADHD, and she was diagnosed really early because we had lots of eyes and lots of people helping us. And I often thought, my God, when you have your own kids, like we might have missed something like this. We just didn't have like all of that support. So that can be, I think, really a good thing, having the experts and the extra people just saying, "Oh, you might want to think about getting her assessed for this or whatever."
It's very important, I believe, that foster parents belong to some type of foster parent support group or foster parent
Mhm.
association, and we lost a lot of those during the lockdowns because
Mhm.
foster parents couldn't go out. But
Mhm.
foster parents have to surround themselves with people who have walked the walk, so to speak, if you will, because our friends, our family members, those closest to us, truly don't understand what it is like 24 hours a day with a child in our house who is in absolute crisis. So you need to surround yourself with people who've been there, done that, so to speak, so you can laugh with each other, you can cry, you can vent to somebody who's not going to judge you or look at you
Right.
critically and say, "I understand, I've been through this, and let's look at this, let's try this," um, and learn from their own experiences. But sometimes you need to surround yourself with some people who get it, and you can just laugh at some of the absurdities that come along with being a foster parent. Because again, it's not a normal lifestyle. Sometimes it is just so absurd, you've gotta laugh at some of the situations that your family goes through.
Yes. Yeah, can you point to a few of those? Like, can you think of like any examples?
Where do I start?
I
Um,
know.
um, I think back to a time we had these 3 boys in our house, and they had no conception, if you will, on hygiene, didn't know how to use a toilet, etcetera. And, one time my wife went downstairs to their bathroom, and I could hear her upstairs yelling, "This is not chocolate on my hands!"
Oh,
Uh,
oh
you know what I
man.
did? You know what I did? I ran away. I ran outside and hid because I didn't want to face it. We've had, I think, 26 cases of lice come through our home.
Oof,
Um,
brutal.
I think we have the lice championship belt of the world. I don't want that championship. Um,
Oh man.
you know,
Yeah.
just yeah, yeah. There's just
Yeah.
so yeah.
I was also interested. I was on your website and I was seeing that you were discussing special needs and foster care, and that a lot of children have special needs, ADHD or oppositional defiant disorder or something like this. Can you talk about that a little bit? And do you think is it getting more? Is it going undiagnosed or is it being handled? What do you think?
I think it's being diagnosed more now,
Mhm.
because there's more awareness and understanding of it. For
Mhm.
so many children during those formative years, those birth through 5 years of age, they have to have a number of things, including a loving, supportive, nurturing environment. And some of these kids don't experience that in foster
Mhm.
care. And they develop reactive attachment disorder. They develop disinhibited social engagement disorder, DSED. They have oppositional defiant disorder, anger management, issues of trust, issues of attachment, because every adult in their life has betrayed their trust in some way, in some fashion, if you will.
Mhm.
And as they go from home to home to home, they fall further and further behind academically. They have more issues of trust. Um, but a lot of those, I think, are now being understood, and
Mhm.
there's more training support services in place for that. We at the Foster Care Institute, we've really tried to focus on those type of issues at the
Mhm.
because foster parents have to be equipped with some strategies and tips to help the children and help the family when they have those placements.
Yeah,
And that's why
absolutely.
I point back to every child in foster care should have regular, consistent professional therapy and professional counseling services.
Mhm. Yeah. And is that something that is covered by, like, can it be covered by Medicaid? Like, every child in foster care has Medicaid, correct? Like some form of.
Right, but every state's different, so, what you're gonna be getting is different, and a lot of
Uh-huh.
foster parents aren't aware of the services that their provider might have for them. Of course,
Right.
budget issues as well, so there might be budget cuts as well. Seems like
Mhm.
foster care is always the top of the list to be cut when it comes to budget issues.
Wow.
Um, but, what again, I go back to 20 minutes of my first placement. I thought, "What is going on with this child?" And looking back on it, the child had a number of, disorders that my wife and we had been briefly taught
Right.
during our training, but we did not have anywhere near the knowledge, the insight, the experience, the strategies that we needed to best help that child.
Right.
So that's what we try to do here at the foster care institute is equip foster parents with those type of skills. But going back to your question, I think there is more understanding now about these issues. Um, but mental health issues are skyrocketing in our country, and so it's even tougher. It's even
Yeah.
tougher.
Yeah. And the mental health issues, they're skyrocketing because of the pandemic, right? But also because of what? Like, in your opinion?
Breakdown of homes,
Mhm.
breakdown of values, um, this phone,
Yeah. No kidding.
you know,
Mhm.
I hate it
I
for
know.
children. My
Yeah.
my daughter just turned 15. One of my daughters, I have five, just turned 15. Um, she's in ninth grade, and she just got a phone
Mhm.
for Christmas.
Yep.
I've seen kids who are 3, 4, 5 years of age on phones. I think, you do not know what you're giving your child. Your child is now on a device that has unlimited access to a whole bunch of horrible, horrible things. Yes, there can be some wonderful things on there, but my goodness, what our children today are being exposed to
Yeah.
is far different than what I was exposed to when I was a child.
Yeah. It's true. It's true, and it's really challenging. Like, I'll speak as a parent of young children. It's really hard not to give them the phone sometimes. I mean, sometimes it's just like you've got to do whatever you are doing. You've got to like get this thing, and it is like the thing that keeps them like glued. And it's horrible. I hate it too. But
That's why
it's yeah.
I wrote the book Keeping Foster Children Safe Online. I think that's the most relevant issue facing foster care today is that of social media. You and I inhabit a social media world. I'm sorry, you and I live in an online world. Our children inhabit it. They inhabit that world.
Hmm.
And if parents are not consistently diligent on shielding, guarding, protecting, and watching for the
Mhm.
children online,
Mhm.
it could lead to a very bad situation.
I know. And it's kind of like the texting and driving thing. Like, people know that it's bad and they're like, "I know I shouldn't be texting," and then they're still texting because it's this like addictive thing that we can't get away from somehow.
And the frontal cortex does not fully develop in a human being until 25 years of age. Some are now saying 30 because of social media. So there's no way a child who is in elementary school is at all equipped, capable of navigating the many, many dangers that social media give them. And that's what we did during the lockdowns. We let these kids go home We forced them to go home, put them on a computer, and so many parents had no idea what they were looking. Oh, they're doing their schoolwork. No, they weren't.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. My brother is a biology teacher, and he said like, "Oh god, those kids, like they're so behind now. Like it's just not even it's not
Pandemic, learning
even
loss.
yeah, it's just crazy. They did nothing." And yeah, I'm sure there were some kids that did something, but in the population that he's working with, he's like, "No, they just lost those years."
Right, 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 and
Yeah.
they'll never get it back.
Yeah. The other
At the same
thing
time at the same time, they're being exposed to some stuff that's gonna really harm them in a number of ways without, again, without any type of monitoring, without any type of mandated reporter.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And no matter how hard as a parent, I try to do the safety things or, what it doesn't seem to I mean, I've taken YouTube off of my phone like a million times and my daughter's 8, she just adds it back in. Like and then she just like she just adds it back in.
sure, sure. Foster parents will tell me, "Oh, my child does not have access to a phone." I say, "Great, you're wrong." Because as soon as they go to school as soon as they go to school, they're gonna be sitting next to somebody in the cafeteria, and they're gonna get on the phone, they'll be talking to somebody, and, again, the most vulnerable children
Yeah.
are the victims.
Yeah. What do you recommend aside from not giving your child a phone until I agree with you that I think 15 is probably a great age to do that. Did you
Yeah.
do research on that? Is that the
We
age?
we don't even begin to have the discussion until you're at least a freshman in high school. We don't even
Okay.
begin that discussion. There's no way we will consider it at least until you're in high school. Even, and my poor daughter, she's spent her first half of the year as a freshman year in high school, probably the only student in high school without a phone. But we recognize
Mhm.
she is not in a position for that yet because
Mm,
of the number of issues that she has.
uh-huh.
Um,
Yeah.
so you've got to be if you're going to give your child a device, you've got to monitor it on a regular basis. Some people tell me, and I've heard legislators tell me that what you can't be looking through your child's phone. It's an invasion of their privacy, and I say that's nonsense. I'm not invading their privacy. I'm protecting my child. I'm protecting my
Agree.
child. So the phones stay downstairs. They don't go up their bedrooms. They stay
Mm.
downstairs. They charge them downstairs. My wife can look through them anytime she wants,
Mhm.
to see and we do that again not to invade their privacy, but to see who is contacting my child,
Sure.
who my child is talking to,
Mhm.
what are they looking at. No child needs to have 1,000 friends on social media. One of our rules is if you don't know the person personally, they're not your friend on social media.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. I love that. These are just like common sense things that people
Yeah,
would
yeah,
think
yeah.
of.
My bookkeeping function should and safe online has just a a bunch of strategies and tips for people to navigate because again, I think it's the most relevant issue facing our children today.
Yeah,
It's not going to go away. This is not the day and age of the Brady Bunch and Gilligan's Island anymore. This is a much scarier world.
that's right. It's true. Not to mention just the attention issue that it
Mm.
creates because they're so used to everything happening really fast and this and I can click here and click here and click they can't they have no attention span to like
Right,
read a book or
right,
like
right, right.
even watch like just a movie one movie all the way through. It's like they have endless Netflix and this and it's just it's really maddening.
If you saw the episode, and you may not even know it, but my wife and I were on Wife Swap years ago.
Okay. Okay.
And we did Wife Swap because we were told that we were gonna be promoting foster care and adoption. They went to a new network, they're gonna show social issues. They've been pestering us for a long time. So we thought, okay, if we can show foster parenting adoption in a positive light, we'll do it. And
Yeah.
we had a lady come over to our house who, my wife went to their house, and she went to a home where they were very, very social media oriented. Their
Okay.
their oldest child, I think, was maybe 7 or 8, and
Ugh.
she was filming 4 YouTube videos a day.
Ay, ay,
Um,
ay.
and the mother's promoting it, and the mother came to our house, and we didn't have any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And my kids are outside, and my kids are taking her outside to go play and in the mud, and she had wanted nothing to do with that. My kids had a vivid imagination.
Yeah.
Those yeah.
Yeah. Oh my god, yeah. That it's so true. I'm always telling my kids, like, "Don't just be a consumer. You're just consuming, consuming. We wanna create. Be a
Yes.
creator. Create."
Yep.
And you can't even have the space in your head to create if you're just constantly doing something. Another thing is, like, kids aren't bored anymore, and it's like you kind of have to be bored. Like, it's not a terrible thing to be bored sometimes.
Or they are bored because they don't have any imagination.
Well, or that. Yeah.
And my youngest, who's 12, for Christmas, she got a typewriter, an
Mm.
old-fashioned typewriter, the kind you gotta click with,
Sure. Yeah.
and, a bunch of colored markers and a drawing pad because she loves to draw,
Yep. I know.
besides all the Barbies.
It's fun. We did no Barbies and we did no electronics this Christmas. We were just like, yeah, no. That my daughter was like, PlayStation. I was like, no, not this year. You're 8. Like,
Yeah,
you don't need it. You
my
don't need a
senior in
PlayStation.
high school got a Xbox.
Right.
That's
And
how
I think
far back we
that's,
are.
yeah,
She
that's
was
fine.
senior,
That's great.
right.
Yeah.
That's a yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, it's so great to talk to you, John. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I would love to have you and Jen on when your book launches. Let me know. Stay in touch. Do you have any other? Did I miss anything, or is there anything else on your heart to say?
Yeah, there's 2 things. Those
Okay.
people who are watching who are not foster parents, not everybody can be a foster parent. But
Mm-hmm.
everybody can help a child in some way. There are a number of ways that you can help a child in crisis where you live. You've got 5 million children experiencing domestic violence in their house every single day. You've got 400,000 kids in foster care, 300,000 human trafficking victims. That means in every county, in every community, every neighborhood, there's a child crying out for help, and you can help in a number of ways. And my second thing is to those foster parents who are listening, I know how tough it is. I know there's some times where you want to quit. I've wanted to quit at times. There have been times where I've thought this is so hard. But at the end of the day, I want foster parents to recognize this, that years from now, the child in their home might not remember their name. Years from now, they might not remember their face. But years from now, they'll remember this, that for a time in their life, and maybe the only time in their life, somebody loved them. And
Mm.
you can't change the world, Rachel, and I can't change the world, but for those children in our homes, their world is changed by what we do.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Thank you. It's a great note to end on. Thanks for your time today, John,
Thank you so much.
and for the work that you're doing in the world and
Thank you,
all
thank
the
you.
children that you're helping.